In 1945, half the world was on fire. Cities were rubble, economies were shattered, and somehow, the United States ended up with half of the planet's wealth, not because Americans were smarter, not because of freedom or democracy or any of the stuff they teach you in school. It was because of three decisions most people have never heard of. Decisions made in quiet hotel rooms while the world was still burying its dead. This is the story of how America didn't just win a war, it rewrote the rules of money itself. Let's start with a simple question nobody asks anymore. Why does the world run on dollars? Seriously, think about it. If you're in Tokyo and you want to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, you don't pay in yen. You convert your yen to dollars, send dollars to Saudi Arabia, and they accept it. The whole planet operates like the dollar is the default currency of Earth, and we just accept it, like it's a law of nature. But it's not. It's a system, one that was deliberately designed, and it gave the United States a superpower that no empire in history ever had. Rewind to 1944, World War II is almost over. Europe is destroyed. The Soviet Union has lost 20 million people. Japan is collapsing. But America is untouched. No bombs fell on Detroit. The U.S. entered the war late, fought far from home, and came out with its industrial base better than ever. The war had turned America into a manufacturing giant. By 1945, the United States produced half of the world's entire industrial output. Half. Every other major economy was in ruins. So, in July 1944, delegates from 44 countries gathered at a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. They were there to design the new global financial system. And the United States, holding all the cards, made sure that system had one very specific feature. The dollar would be the center of everything. Here's how it worked. Every country agreed to peg their currency to the dollar at a fixed rate, and the dollar would be pegged to gold, $35 per ounce. Locked in, guaranteed. If you were France or Britain, you could always trade your dollars for gold at that price. This meant the dollar was, essentially, as good as gold. So, the world started holding dollars, not just as money, but as a reserve, a safe asset. The thing you kept in your vault because it was stable, trusted, and backed by the largest economy on Earth. Every country needed dollars to trade, to buy oil, to stabilize their own currency. And there was only one place to get dollars, America. Now here's where it gets interesting. If you're the country that prints the global reserve currency, you have a privilege no one else has. You can run a deficit forever. Think about it. If Argentina wants to buy German cars, it needs to sell something to get dollars first. It has to earn foreign currency to spend it. But the United States, it just prints more dollars, and the rest of the world accepts them because they need them. This is called exorbitant privilege. The French coined the term in the 1960s, and they were furious about it, because it meant the U.S. could buy foreign goods, build military bases, fight wars, fund massive government programs, and never really worrying about paying for it. The debt just gets absorbed by the rest of the world. But wait, there was a catch. The dollar was supposed to be backed by gold. That was the deal. And in the 1950s and 60s, the U.S. started spending a lot. The Korean War, the Vietnam War, the space race. And slowly, the world started to notice something. There were way more dollars floating around than there was gold sitting in Fort Knox. By the late 1960s, European governments started asking a very uncomfortable question. What if we actually tried to convert our dollars back to gold? France went first. In 1965, President Charles de Gaulle literally sent the French Navy to New York to pick up gold bars. He wanted out of the dollar system. Other countries watched and started thinking the same thing. The U.S. was in trouble. So, in 1971, President Richard Nixon did something shocking. He closed the gold window. In a televised address, Nixon announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars to gold. The peg was gone. The system was over. Everyone expected chaos, a global financial collapse. But that's not what happened, because by 1971, the world was so addicted to dollars that it didn't have a choice. Every central bank held dollars. Every trade was priced in dollars. The entire infrastructure of global finance was built on them. So the system just kept going. Only now, the dollar wasn't backed by gold. It was backed by nothing but trust and force. Let's talk about the force part. In 1973, there was an oil crisis. OPEC cut production, and prices exploded. The U.S. saw an opportunity. American diplomats sat down with Saudi Arabia and made a deal. The Saudis would agree to sell oil exclusively in dollars. In exchange, the U.S. would provide military protection and weapons. Saudi Arabia said yes, and one by one, the rest of OPEC followed. This became known as the petrodollar system, and it changed everything. Now, if you wanted to buy oil and every country needs oil, you had to have dollars. It didn't matter if you trusted the Federal Reserve. You needed dollars to survive, so the world kept using them, and the United States kept printing them. Here's what this looks like in practice. Let's say you're South Korea. You make smartphones. You want to buy oil from Kuwait. You have to get dollars first. So, you sell your smartphones to America, get paid in dollars, and then you use those dollars to buy oil. But America doesn't have to do that dance. If the U.S. wants oil, it just pays in dollars, which it prints. The whole world has to earn dollars. America, us, makes them, and this has been going on for 50 years. So what does this mean for American wealth? It means the U.S. has been able to consume more than it produces for decades. The trade deficit, the gap between what America imports and what it exports, has been negative since the 1970s. In 2023, the U.S. imported over $3 trillion worth of goods. It exported about $2 trillion. That's a $1 trillion gap every single year, and it's fine, because the rest of the world accepts digital entries in a ledger in exchange for real goods. America gets the stuff, the world gets the paper. And it's not just trade, because the dollar is the global reserve currency. Everyone wants to lend money to the U.S. government. U.S. Treasury bonds are considered the safest asset on earth. When things get scary, investors don't flee the dollar, they run toward it. This means the U.S. can borrow money at incredibly low interest rates, lower than any other country. It's why the U.S. national debt is over $36 trillion and rising, and yet the system keeps going. Any other country with that much debt would face a crisis. But the U.S., it just issues more bonds, and the world buys them. But here's the uncomfortable part. This system only works as long as everyone keeps playing along, as long as the world believes the dollar is stable, as long as there's no better option. And for 50 years, there hasn't been, but things are shifting. China has been pushing to trade in its own currency. Russia is moving away from dollars after sanctions cut it off from the system. Even Saudi Arabia has been making quiet deals with China to accept yuan for oil. None of this is enough to collapse the dollar, not yet. But it raises the question nobody in Washington wants to ask. What happens when the rest of the world doesn't need dollars anymore? Because the entire American standard of living is built on this system. The cheap consumer goods, the low mortgage rates, the fact that the government can run trillion-dollar deficits without immediate consequence. All of it depends on the dollar being the king. If that changes, the math changes. Suddenly, the U.S. would have to earn its way in the world like everyone else. It couldn't just print money to buy goods. Borrowing would get expensive, inflation would surge. The lifestyle Americans take for granted would become a lot harder to afford. And here's the irony. The very things that made the dollar dominant, the military power, the trade deficits, the constant borrowing are the same things that might eventually undermine it. The more the U.S. uses the dollar as a weapon, the more other countries want an alternative. So, how did America get so rich? Not by working harder, but by being in the right place at the right time and making sure the global economy ran through them. By turning money itself into one of the most elegant, ruthless, and invisible forms of power ever created, it's still working, for now, but the question nobody wants to answer is the simplest one. What happens when it stops? Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing for more stories about the hidden systems that run our world.